Hello everyone, welcome back to my Avatar tier list series where I'll be ranking the Avatar characters based on their skill and strength and knowledge as combative opponents, except for today because we're dealing with spirits. More on that later. Today, we will be looking at the most influential immortals of the series, beings, entities, whatever you want to call them, and I have to admit, this one was very tough to do. Mostly because the nature of power is very different for these characters. Oftentimes I feel the fan base, myself included, typically looks at power based off of destructive ability. One's abilities to exert their will over someone else, to be able to defeat someone else, that sort of a thing. But when it came to these characters, these spirits, it didn't really jive so well. Like when I was making the list and I was scripting out the talking points, I couldn't make it make sense for how they would be in tier 1, tier 2, and that's the reason we have this 1.5 system. And this mostly came by way of the definition of power itself, which, according to Google, means 1. The ability to do something or act in a particular way, especially as a faculty or quality. 2. The capacity or ability to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events. For the purposes of this very specific video, though I should preface this will not hold for the rest of the tier list, I will be going with that second definition. I feel like that will serve us better for this particular list, whereas the rest of the list, I think it does function better to look at who is combatively more viable, who is a better fighter, because this doesn't really work because most of these characters we see don't really fight, but they are quite influential to what happens in the Avatar universe. And as I stated before, this isn't really a tier 2 video, it's not a tier 1 video. Even me titling this as a 1.5 tier isn't really right because they don't really work in the same stratosphere as these other characters. They really are in a separate category all unto themselves. So this is really more of like an honorable mention of these characters rather than really saying that, hey, they rank between, you know, the Avatar states and like Bloodbenders or Sozin's Comet Firebenders. Like it doesn't really work that way. So keep that in mind that this list is very different. It's more separate than it is a continuum of the other tier list. If this is your first time here on this channel, you should go ahead and watch the first video in this series. The playlist is linked below in the description box. Hopefully I remember to put a little box in the top right corner too, so you can click on it there. But if you did watch the first video in the series and you are continuing on with the series, go ahead and keep watching. Without any more introductions or preamble, let's get straight into it. Let's look at the most influential characters of the Avatar series.
As you can see, it is a game that requires great patience.
First up, we have Class D. I designate this group mostly as humans and creatures that were able to ascend from their physical forms into the spirit realm while relatively keeping their own consciousness. These are characters like the Painted Lady, Iroh, Fang, and all the mortals who ascended into the spirit realm of their own accord. Though one could argue that Fang's ability to do this is more his tie to Avatar Roku than himself, but still, let's give Fang some credit here. The reason they're at the bottom of this pseudo tier is mostly because they didn't really do much to affect the physical realm and had very minimal effect on the spirit realm itself. While the Painted Lady initially stuck around to protect the town of Zhonghui, the polluted rivers generated by the Fire Nation industry ultimately drove her away. Iroh didn't really do much in the physical realm itself. This is Iroh, of course, we're speaking about Spirit Iroh, not physical Iroh, who is a separate character who we'll talk about later in the series. But like Fang, he was just kind of around in the spirit realm, and he didn't really do much in it unless you really count, you know, when he was helping out Korra and Jinora, when they were able to meet with him and speak with him there and get advice from him. But other than that, it's very minimal, his effect on either one of these planes, and that's the reason why he's kind of like in this little bottom tier. But the reason that they are here and the reason why I wanted to note them is because they do have powerful spiritual connections to be able to do this in the first place. It's not usual for humans or physical beings to ascend to the spirit realm without some sort of outside influence, whether we're speaking about like harmonic convergence or the Avatar states and the hopping of past lives. For someone who is just a standard human, standard creature to be able to do that, I think should be noted, and that's the reason why I have them on this list at all.
My old friend the Avatar. It's been a long time.
At our next tier, we have the likes of those spirits who are known for their abilities to give and take faces. Most infamous is Ko the Facestealer and the aptly named mother of Ko, the Mother of Faces. Ko, as we know, is most famous for taking the face of a lover of Karuk, or Avatar Karuk, and then eventually meeting Avatar Aang, who learns about this and is able to actually subvert Ko the Facestealer and get away. While on the surface it seems his only ability is to take people's faces away, it actually goes a step beyond that, where he not only does that, but takes a bit of their identity and a bit of their personality and soul. Kind of think about Dementors and Harry Potter. And on the other side of that ability is his mother, Mother of Faces, who has the ability to not only give people faces, or people, creatures, plants faces, but to also give them an entirely new identity, as she did with Ursa in the Search comic books, or graphic novels, I believe. And if I wanted to get very technical with the definition, I would even say that the Mother of Faces is a step above Ko the Facestealer, because she has the ability to negate his ability by giving back faces that he took away.
I see that you have some knowledge of the past, so you should know that humans are no longer allowed in my library.
The next set of immortals are those who hold great sway with the human and spirit affairs in one way or another, starting with Tienhai. Though not as influential as the others, Tienhai was known for overseeing the coastline of Mosei Sea. And though she herself isn't very powerful in a combative sense, and the reason I have this impression is because General Old Iron wanted to give his service to her to protect her before she declined, she still was very influential to the sea and the coastline that she oversaw, where the humans were able to prosper under her watch. And then we have Tong, who is perhaps the most knowledgeable spirit in the entire franchise, notably a historian who has caused rifts within the history of the show itself, such as Zhao finding out the mortal bodies of Tui and La, which eventually led to Tui's death during the Siege of the North, or Sokka finding out about the Day of Black Sun. And then going back to the notion of Tui and La, we have Yue, who could kind of fit into tier D, or to class D I should say, because she was a human who ascended into the spirit realm, but also it's because she had part spirit within her, because that's how she was able to survive as a baby. There's a whole thing. If you're an Avatar fan, you know what I'm talking about. But the fact that she herself became the moon and held all the responsibilities of what it is to be the moon when Tui died and she had to replace Tui in that position, she became one of the most influential spirits by that event. Now, if we really think about it, the moon is extremely important for waterbenders, as it is part of the source of their power. It makes them the most powerful when it's at the full moon, especially we know that for bloodbenders, and then going on to some other bloodbenders who can do it without the full moon. That's a whole other thing. Don't worry, we'll get to that. But also the fact that the moon holds part of the balance of the entire world. You don't get too much more influential than that. And by extension, the spirits themselves, Tui and La, though Tui is now dead within the franchise after the events of Book 1, The Last Airbender, we still do have La, who is the overseer of the ocean's waters, which is pretty substantial as well. For me, I would still say maybe Yue is a little bit more influential, though I mean, she does kind of work in concert with the oceans, as we do know that the moon, or our real life moon, does affect the water tides. They work in concert, which is what I was trying to say before, where there's a whole balance to everything. So really, I guess they do hold parity, but I do kind of hold Yue a little bit higher, just for the fact that she was able to ascend as she did at the end of Book 1. But to say anything at all these characters I feel like do have a influence, as this is what this is all about. They'll have a great influence on what happened in the franchise itself.
The true mind can weather all the lies and illusions without being lost.
And at the top of this pseudo tier are the greatest spirits in the series, though lion turtles aren't actually immortals, and they're not really spirits. They're actually just long-living mortal beings who happen to have great influence on the Avatar franchise, but still, we'll still put them in this category. When looking at all the notable entities of this list, this bunch, the lion turtles themselves, have the greatest influence on both the physical realm and the spirit realm. As we know, if it wasn't for them giving bending to the humans would not have progressed as much as they did, including, in fact, a little tidbit that I found out while doing the research. Thank you also to my beta readers who look at my talking points before I do these scripts. They actually were killed off And they were made extinct by the very people who they gave bending to. And unlike some of the others that we've discussed on this list, the lion turtles affected both physical and spirit realms relatively equally. But not only equally, but substantially. As we've seen with some of the other characters, they had some minimal effect maybe on the spirit realm, or a minimal effect on the physical plane, or minimal on both. The lion turtles have made the most long-standing influence in terms of the entire series, to the point where they have been called, the phrasing Deus Ex Machina has been attributed to them, which Merriam-Webster defines as 1. A god introduced by means of a crane in ancient Greek and Roman drama to decide the final outcome, or 2. A person or thing, as in fiction or drama, that appears to be introduced suddenly and unexpectedly and provides a contrived solution to an apparently insolvable difficulty. And the very introduction of lion turtles, at least into the franchise and us knowing what they are, came by way of one of the last episodes of The Last Airbender, when Aang finds one of the last lion turtles who provides him with energy bending, which a lot of people can criticize is a bit of a Deus Ex Machina, but it's not only a Deus Ex Machina in the sense of like modern, like, oh, that's just like, you just put that in at the end of the story to, create a solution, but that's literally how it used to be used in old Greek and Roman mythology, is that at the end of the story, you would just have God intervention. And to have a character that has the ability to be godlike and have godlike intervention into the plot and into the history and into the influence of the franchise, I don't quite see how you get much more influential than that. And that's why I have Lion Turtles at the top of this list. And that's the list for this very odd bit of tiering. Though some of these characters can't be measured by their combative viability, I still wanted to put something like this to give them at least a mention, especially when they have so much great influence on the franchise itself. In our next video, believe me, we'll go back to our standard way of looking at these characters. We'll go back to just combative viability and characters who are more physical beings, or at least that we've seen fight in the series. But in terms of this video, did you agree with the ordering of the list? Was there a character or spirit that you thought was left out? And no, do not mention Rava or Vatu or Old Iron or Hundun, because those are characters who do have combative viability and have shown us fights, which is the reason why they're not in this list, and they'll show up later in other lists. So no, anyone besides those kinds of characters. If you think there was other spirits that could have been spoken about who did have an influence on the franchise but don't have combative ability, then yes, let me know in the comments below. And as always, peace, love, and remember, be water, my friends.